Welcome to Today in Putnam County, hosted by Putnam County Mayor Randy Porter, the show that takes a look at the events and what's happening all around Putnam County, as well as interviews with local, community, and business leaders. And now, sharing his insights and experience, here's Today in Putnam County with County Mayor Randy Porter.
Welcome to Today in Putnam County. I'm your host, County Mayor Randy Porter. Thanks for being with us this week. Our show is about retirement and estate planning this week. I think something that a lot of the folks do not prepare for properly and do not think about sometimes until it's too late. So we've got a financial specialist with us today, and that's Mr. Landon Vick with Raymond James here in Cookeville. Landon, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Randy. It's good to be here.
I saw a news article where they estimated that about a third of all Americans don't properly plan for retirement or their estate. Is that true?
Yeah, I think I've seen even worse numbers than that, where up to 50% of folks may not have $1,000 in savings or emergencies, purposes. So yeah, that's a sad reality. It's somewhat a function of people may not have access through their employers and small businesses and things like that. But I think it's often that there's just a perceived barrier in getting advice and who do I go to, and maybe I don't have enough to do anything sort of mentality.
Yeah.
But
kind of a stigma sometimes with people in it that I don't want to talk about that. I don't have enough to make a difference. But if folks don't plan, and you see these folks, I'm sure you see them all the time, they wait too long and they get up at retirement age and then they don't have enough funds to be able to retire, and you see these folks still working when they're some 70 and 80 and so forth.
Sure. For a few years, I spoke to high school students, and I would come in their personal finance class, and what I would impress on them as strongly as I could was their greatest asset was time.
Yeah.
And I think Einstein said that compounding, was the eighth wonder of the world, and so you really, to get a late start, it's still worth the attention and the planning. But yeah, you have forfeited something there.
Yeah.
For sure.
And retirement's not what it once was, is it? I mean, I go back to my grandparents and I'm thinking they were farmers, and grandfather worked at a sawmill, and when he got ready to retire, what they had saved and Social Security and what they were going to be able to still have with the farm. Today, totally different world, isn't it? With especially with inflation, the way it's went up in the last several years. It's going to take, and we're living longer too, right?
Absolutely. When Social Security was created back in the 30s, the first recipient of Social Security, I believe her name was Ina May, and what struck me about her story is that at that moment in time, life expectancy was in the early 60s, okay? She was the first recipient and lived to be 100 years old.
Wow.
Okay, and so she defied the odds at that time, but for most people, yes, you worked until you couldn't,
yeah.
And there was really no other option. And so really in between that period in time and today, we had somewhat of a golden age of retirement planning where so many companies had pension plans.
Yeah.
And so defined benefit plans. So rather than defined contribution, which is what most people have, 401ks, there was a defined benefit they could plan on when they turned 55, 60, 65. That plus Social Security, plus whatever they had saved, they had kind of three legs on their stool. And the vast majority of people don't have that anymore. They're solely relying on what they've accumulated and then trying to figure out, how do I turn that into income?
I'll never forget a gentleman, a good friend of mine, and he had a business and did very well in business. And I don't know, he worked probably into his lower 70s, enjoyed what he was doing, retired, and thought he had enough. I saw him one day, and he had turned 92, I believe it was, and he said, "Randy, I never dreamed that I would live this long. I've kind of spent my retirement savings, and now I'm totally dependent upon Social Security." And I think that hits home with a lot of people now, that with the life expectancies and living longer and not planning. So let's talk about retirement and planning for that. I heard somewhere or read somewhere that it used to be that you thought that if you had $1 million sitting here or something that you could live for, retire off of that. Is there some kind of equation or something that you use for people to kind of decide how much it's going to take for them to be able to retire comfortably?
Sure. I was having a conversation this morning, and I said that the most important number for us to narrow in on is for you to do the things that you most value, that are most important to you when that time comes for you to retire, is how much you think you would need each month. And that's what we plan everything around right now.
Oh, yeah, paycheck,
the paycheck. And so that doesn't change in retirement. I think that should still be the main focus. That does help us turn around and understand what do we need in a portfolio to safely provide that over time. And so one of the kind of landmark, if you really want to nerd out on this stuff, and read studies about withdrawal rates and things like that, historically there has been a 4% withdrawal rate, that's been kind of held out as the standard.
Right.
Not just that let's take 4% of a portfolio every year, but let's also adjust it for inflation year over year. If it's invested properly, managed the right way, that would last 20, 30 plus years.
Yeah.
Okay. So your $1 million is going to produce 40,000 a year.
Right.
Okay. And so I think that's a great place to start. Okay, is just simply nail down what do I think monthly we need, multiply that by 12, and effectively multiply that number by 20. Okay, and you're going to get to the same
number.
Point. Right.
And one thing that everybody counts on, that you keep hearing on the news, because I've heard this for years and years and years, is Social Security.
Sure.
Is that going to last? Is it going to go insolvent? And what's your opinion?
What's my opinion?
Yeah, just asking. In today's society and where we are, what's your opinion on Social Security?
Yeah. Well, Randy, if we pulled up our pay stubs, okay, we would see a line item for FICA.
Yeah.
Right. Those dollars are coming out of everyone's paycheck, every pay period. And so when people say the money's going to run out, okay, well, the money's always coming in.
Right.
Okay. And so, and with a few adjustments to Social Security, we could easily see the program strengthened. Now, I'm not a politician and I can't begin to know, what that is going to look like. But I think that rather than worrying, is it going to run out, every retiree should ask, how should myself and my spouse approach this to get the biggest benefit out of it? I think that should really be what leads our thinking around it.
Right. And so baby boomers, you had the big population increase with the baby boomers. Reading the other day, though, that the number of people being born in the United States, I guess, is on a kind of a downturn, and they're not expecting families to have as many children. Is that going to affect the Social Security going forward with not as many people putting in? Or are they going to have to put more in to be able to keep us at the same level we are?
Yeah, I think that is certainly a factor. I think it's much more of a concern in European countries, in Japan. They have a lot of the similar structures, right? A lot of the similar programs.
Right.
Their numbers are much more drastic. What we still have very much on our side is we're a wonderful place to be.
We are.
And so in light of that, even with us not replacing at the same rate internally, we continue to have people that want to be here. And so I think that'll be a benefit of the program for a long time.
Yeah, and if you go back, I think you can find news stories that would go back 40, 50 years talking about Social Security being insolvent in 5 years or 10 years. It keeps going. It's
well, if it's a huge source of income to a huge voting bloc, it's constantly going to be talked about. Strike fear.
Becomes a political thing. Sure. We're talking with Landon Vick. He's a financial specialist here in Cookeville with Raymond James. We're talking about retirement and estate planning, something that we all need to take heed of and make sure that we we plan for those things, because one day, the good Lord willing, we're going to come to retirement age, and you're going to be looking for funds to be able to carry you as long as we live here on this earth. So we're getting some tips from Landon, and talk about estate planning and some things that you can do to help your retirement in the future. But we've got to take a break. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
And now back to Today in Putnam County, hosted by Putnam County Mayor Randy Porter.
Welcome back to Today in Putnam County. I'm your host, County Mayor Randy Porter. Thanks for joining us this week. Hope you're having a great week. We're talking about retirement and estate planning on this week's show. I've got a retirement specialist, Landon Vick. He's here in Cookeville with Raymond James. And Landon, we've been talking about Social Security and retirement and folks not planning for retirement.
Sure.
We were talking about in the break some common mistakes that people make when it comes to retiring. And let's run down through those.
Sure.
Some people try to retire too early and don't have the funds to take care of them.
Sure. That's a common thing. I met with someone just last year, and he was basically said, "Is the time right?" And we went through the work that we do, and he needed probably 3 or 4 more years.
Yeah.
And so, but there's something embedded in that too that I think is important, and that is that I've come to see keys to retirement. We're always focused on finances. Okay, that's what we really think retirement's about.
Right.
How am I going to replace my check? Where's the income going to come from? Do I have enough? Okay, well that's very important work. That's most of what we do.
Right.
But purpose is another huge piece, and so we have this innate purpose just in the work we do. If we're working for someone, they're telling us where to be, when to be,
Right.
et cetera.
Set schedule.
Right. Some people do really well with all that freedom, and some people don't.
Don't do very well. Yeah.
They don't do well.
Not having something to get up for in the morning, right?
Something to get up for, suddenly their spouse has someone with them all day, and that can be really sweet. It can also be trying in different ways, so I think that something that's often overlooked is just, what are my days going to look like?
Yeah. What am I going to do?
Right. We're not going to, whatever your thing is, golf, fishing, hunting, we're not going to do it every day.
Right.
And we know that. And so I think that there's a purpose piece, that is often overlooked. And I'll just say real briefly too, this third piece is community. Lots of times that can get wrapped into purpose, but being thoughtful about who are the people that I'm going to spend these days and weeks and months with is a really important
It's an important thing to think about. One I hear a lot of people talk about is, when am I going to start collecting my Social Security? Mm-hmm. So what's the thought process? What's the proper thought process on that? Is it better to start as early as you can? Is it better to wait as long as you can? What's your opinion?
Yeah. My kids love it when they ask me a question and I say, it depends.
It depends. You sound like my county attorney.
There you go. And it does depend. I remember sitting with a lady who was so excited to be retiring. She was 62 years old. And so she felt like she had her numbers right. She was about to go to Social Security and file for a benefit, okay, at 62, the earliest you can file. And then she just casually mentioned that she was going to go visit her grandmother that afternoon. And I thought for a second, your grandmother? And I said, how old is your grandmother? She was 102 years old.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And so she was potentially looking at a 40-year retirement.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I believe the number is somewhere around 75% of people file for Social Security before their full retirement benefit. And so for folks my age, full retirement's at 67.
Right.
And then you get an increased benefit out to age 70.
Right.
And so I think there's a default sense that I should file.
Because I don't know how long I'm going to live, right?
Right. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think that some real planning can come into play when you have spouses, when you've got different earning records. Many of my clients, we've had one file early and one wait for a very long period of time, okay, out in the future.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it definitely deserves, it depends and it deserves some thought.
On the situation,
Sure.
yeah. And a lot of folks, they don't think about inflation or healthcare costs going forward into their life, right? Because, I mean, I don't think we could have imagined the inflation that we saw over the last few years, 8-9%.
Yeah.
Healthcare costs continuing to go up. They don't plan for those, do they? And what that's going to cost them going down the line?
Randy, do you remember what your first car cost?
Yes.
Can you share it with us?
$3,400.
$3,400.
Yeah.
They don't cost that anymore.
No, that's right.
Yeah, and so that's a reality.
Yeah.
Right. That's the nature of it, and that speaks into something that we wouldn't get into great detail on. But if you have a retirement portfolio, right, then we need assets that can outpace inflation.
Yeah.
Right. We don't need to be losing ground on that, and so that's a whole nother conversation what that should look like. But I think that there are some great ways, right, to own great companies in order to have your assets keep pace with inflation.
Right.
You know, and when it comes to the healthcare, that is such a, that can obviously take the what am I going to have to pay in addition to what Medicare covers, but then what long-term event could I have down the road? Different planning for each of those, but I think it still speaks to the importance of our assets having the ability to grow.
Right, and be able to carry on and,
Right.
and make sure we've got that inflation doesn't eat it up.
Right.
One thing I hear occasionally is folks say, well, my employer offers a 401k and they're going to match 10 or 15%, but I don't want to do that. I'm not going to put my money into that company or something. Mm-hmm. That's a no-brainer, isn't it, Landon?
Sure.
Giving away free money?
I think it's the closest thing to free money we can generally find. I think that oftentimes the plans, so many details and provisions are presented that it gets kind of confusing. But if there's a match that 3% of my pay is matched 100%, so that 6% is going in, I do that all day long.
Yeah, lock it in.
Sure.
That's
Sure.
one of the mysteries, I guess, that.
Well, and Randy, I've even seen it with folks that say they take a job after they're 55 or even 60, and it's still that mentality of, well, it's probably too late.
Yeah.
No, it's a dollar for a dollar, so just go ahead with it.
Yeah. And when it comes to retirement, starting as early as possible is the key, isn't it? Even when you're young. I know when I started with the county, I'll never forget that they started this. It's similar to a 401k, but it's 457 plan for government employees. And the financial guy that was talking to me and signing up to the county employees said, you can put in as little as like $10 a paycheck or something, and I said, well, that's not going to make anything.
It won't matter.
Well, he started showing me these numbers, that $10 or $20 a paycheck, and now I look back on that, and I did it, and I went through the '87 crash, went through the 2000 tech crash, went through all these things, but it always came back, and now that's a huge part of my retirement plan for the future. So if these, it's never, start early if they can, and even if it's $10 or $20 a paycheck, that's going to add up over the time, right?
Absolutely. I think that doing a little for a long time almost always beats doing a lot later.
Right.
And so that's the whole benefit of starting early.
Trying to time the market and all that kind of stuff. You don't do that, right?
Don't do any of that. No. But because the other side of that is, let's say that I'm 40 years old and I'm not done anything.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's fine. You can, we always start where we're at. Even at 40, if I only have 20 years to save, I could live another 20 or 30 years after that.
Right.
Right. So when we think about time horizons, your time horizon is not the age I am now to the day I retire. And sometimes we get focused on that.
Yeah.
No, it's for, like you said, all those days.
How long we're going to live.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Talking with Landon Vick, he's a financial specialist here in Cookeville with Raymond James. And we're talking about estate planning and retirement. And the final segment coming up, we're going to talk strictly about estate planning and how that is so important to you and your family coming up. We've got to take a break, though. Stay with us.
And now back to Today in Putnam County, hosted by Putnam County Mayor Randy Porter.
Welcome back to Today in Putnam County. I'm your host, County Mayor Randy Porter. Hope you're having a great week. Our show this week is about retirement and estate planning. And I've got Landon Vick. He's with Raymond James here in Cookeville, and he's a financial expert. And we've been talking about retirement. But Landon, I want to hit a little bit on you. During one of the breaks, we were talking about moving to Cookeville, and,
Sure.
and I want to talk a little bit about you and your family. And you've got a similar story to mine. Is you didn't grow up here,
No.
but you came here to go to Tennessee Tech.
Exactly. I think the first time I ever came to Cookeville was to tour the campus.
Yeah.
And I still vividly remember at the end of the tour, I looked at my best friend Justin, and we just said, "Do you want a room together?" And we did that for 4 years, and Tech was a wonderful experience.
Absolutely was for me too. Hadn't changed much, has it, in Cookeville?
I used to give tours of campus. I was a student admissions representative. Those tours would be very different today.
And I don't know what if you think the same, but our campus and things it's grown more in probably the last 10 or 15 years than probably the last 30, 40, 50 years before that, maybe.
Yeah, I am still able to stand in front of my dorm, so that's still there. But yeah, so much has changed. But I guess I'll say how much I appreciate how beautiful the campus is.
It is.
You know,
Done an amazing
they've done a
job,
wonderful
with it. Met your wife here and kids and.
Yeah, I met my wife Candace at Tennessee Tech, and through a student ministry called RUF.
Yeah.
And we were in the same church, and I was smitten. We got married shortly after we started dating, and we have 6 kids. So
6 kids. Wow.
6 kids later.
That's
we're
fun
still
at
here.
Christmas, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's great.
Absolutely.
Well, we're glad you're here. We were talking, both of us never been anywhere that we found any better than Cookeville. We live in a great place.
Right.
Let's talk about some things that have happened recently in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
So the past, well, they called it the Big Beautiful Bill.
Big beautiful bill.
Yeah.
You gotta love those names.
And there's some things that are going to affect folks coming in the future that are part of that bill. Can you go over a few of those?
I'll hit a few. I'll focus on the ones that are most relevant to my clients. One piece is that there was a lot of talk about eliminating tax on Social Security.
Yeah.
Right, and tips and overtime. With the Social Security piece, if you're age 65 or over, you now have an additional deduction that you take. And so while it doesn't eliminate the taxation of Social Security, it helps offset it dramatically. And so that presents a lot of opportunities.
So they're going to be able to keep more of their Social Security money. Is that what you're saying coming up? Or?
Yeah, the effect is ultimately going to be they'll see their tax bill go down.
With the IRS at the end of the
Right,
year.
right. Everyone's situation is different, and I'm not a CPA.
Right.
I think but the big piece is that is part of the bill that will expire. So that extra deduction's through 2028. So it presents some planning opportunities.
Right.
Yeah.
What else that you can think of that involves retirement?
The other big piece is in 2017, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act lowered our federal income tax brackets.
Right.
And so those lower rates are now permanent. They were going to sunset at the end of this year. And so those are now in place, which is great.
That was going to be a big hit to most folks.
Bigger than they realized, because
Yeah.
2017 feels like a long time ago, and you kind of forget what your tax situation
We're
was.
back then, yeah.
So that's another big piece. And then the 2 other things that stand out to me that have some relevance is there had been a limitation on how much of your local income property taxes could be deducted. And so it put a cap on a lot of folks.
Right.
We're fortunate to not pay a great amount in real estate taxes
Right.
compared to other parts of the country. But there's a lot of relief there so that people will be able to itemize more in that space. And an interesting piece too is there's a universal charitable deduction so that even folks who take a standard deduction and don't itemize have $1,000 to $2,000 that they can offset their income through a charitable gift.
Wow.
Okay, so that jumped out at me, as I reviewed the bill. So those are the big ones for retirees.
Well, that's great. Anything helps, doesn't it?
No, we could go on and on about that.
Yeah, that's that bill was hundreds of pages long, and it's going to take a while for everybody to weed through it and figure out what is really in it. In the last 7 or 8 minutes we got, I want to talk about estate planning. Mm-hmm. That's something big that you do also. I saw something that like a third people that they polled said that they had some kind of family conflict because of lack of estate planning. And I know you and I, you probably got a lot more stories. I have one of some family friends that we know that their mom and dad passed away and didn't do any estate planning. And there was 2 children, and they had a falling out over who got which side of the road as far as the property goes. There was a road went down through the middle of it, and both pieces were nice. Okay. But they passed away a little while back, so they didn't speak for years and years and years over a falling out over lack of estate planning. And you see that? I mean, folks, I know we don't want to think about dying, but that's something we're all going to do. Sure. And making sure that we don't put a burden on our families and our kids and everything. I mean, it's something that everybody needs to be thinking about, right?
Absolutely. Psalm 90, verse 12 says, teach me to number my days that I might have a heart of wisdom.
Exactly.
And I think about that verse so often, because it certainly has relevance in this conversation, right? It's bound to happen. And so, a personal experience that I had was my parents were divorced when I was younger, and my mom remarried a man named Steve. And they were very much in love and been married for about a year. And on a date where at that time there was music playing, band on a square, dancing kind of in the downtown area. Yeah. They'd had a dance together, and Steve sat down in a chair and had a massive heart attack. Wow. And was gone. And they were very early on into their marriage. There had not been any planning done. There had not even, I think something that we often overlook is you're doing estate planning when you open an account anywhere. Yeah. By virtue of whether you put your spouse or your partner's name on that account, or if you put a beneficiary on. And so they simply had not done any of that. My mom suddenly became landlord to rental property
that she knew nothing
that
about.
She didn't know anything about,
Wow.
And by God's grace, so many things were worked out, but there had been children from a previous marriage and a number of things that could have, like you alluded to in your story, been managed a lot better. Yeah. So I think a lot like the finance piece, it just feels overwhelming. But I think the simple idea is that whatever we have accumulated, we likely have some idea who we would want or what organization we would want to benefit from this. And so an estate plan, it can look a lot of different ways, but it's just the most orderly way. How can we do this with the most order and efficiency, not to mention tax considerations and things like that. But do we want our plan or the state of Tennessee's plan? If we don't make a choice.
Exactly. And my wife's parents, they lived to be in their 90s, and they passed away a few years ago, and they totally refused to do a will or anything. And I saw the trouble that she had to go through, her and her sister, of trying with bank accounts and property and probate. And I mean, it was drawn out for months and months and months and months, well, actually years. And I saw the trouble they went through because they didn't take the time just to go and do the simple estate planning. And it made us immediately go.
Right. You learned.
Oh yeah, learned our lesson. We immediately went and did all that and made sure that our daughter wasn't going to have to worry about all the things that was going to come up in the event of either one of our deaths or both our deaths. Yeah. So
I think I've seen consolidation and communication are like just two simple keys. Yeah. A lot of people benefit from simply, if they have some various accounts places, consolidating those, like simplifying things. We're still working through a situation where there were accounts in probably 13 different places.
Wow.
And so, and then communication, which is every family is going to divulge information in different ways and at different levels, but just simply communicating kind of, even if it's, this is who you need to go see, or these are the phone calls you need to make, or if you want to describe it in more detail, this is how things are going to go. That's a huge gift to your family.
Well, it is. I was thinking too, had an uncle pass away a few years ago, and he was single, and I've actually never been married. And so he made one of his nephews, the estate planner. He's still dealing with that today because my uncle, he had accounts everywhere that they didn't have a clue.
No.
It's like a needle in a haystack, searching for stuff, and then maybe a year or two later they'd get a letter from a bank or from somewhere saying there's this account here, and I know what a nightmare it's been for him. So, folks, make sure you plan for your estate and what's going to happen when you pass away, your spouse passes away. Don't leave it for your kids to have to worry about. Have some structure there. Landon, I appreciate you being on the
Randy.
show. You're a wealth of information. Tell us if someone wanted to contact you, where your office is, or how's the best way to do that?
Yeah, my website is landonvick.com. And so that's the easiest way to get a good understanding of who we do our best work with, schedule a time to talk. And my office is right here in Cookeville on Neal Street.
Good deal. Well, thank you for being on the show. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
That's our show. Thanks for joining us. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and may God continue to bless Putnam County.
You've been listening to Today in Putnam County, hosted by Putnam County Mayor Randy Porter.